Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jesse At, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year! My last podcast release, I spoke about the changes in 2024. This first episode is considered a special weekly release. I was able to spend time with experts in our industry in a roundtable format. They each chose their own question of choice to share with the startup brand owners, such as the CEOs and brand owners I've interviewed throughout the year. We are all big supporters and want to see new brands succeed. These panelists are experts and each have some great advice as we start out the new year. If any of you listening are looking to start a new brand or be a part of the beverage industry, don't do it without listening to this podcast, because there is amazing content for you from these 5 amazing panelists. The panelists are Brian Rosen, Chairman, Growth Beverage; Gary Schneidkraut, VP of Business Development, Wine and Spirits of Protis Global; Matt Giese, COO of Funny Water; and Taylor Foxman, founder and CEO of the Industry Collective. Last but certainly not least is Ben Salisbury, president and founder of Salisbury Creative Group and the Wine Sales Simulator. Get ready, y'all, because we jump right into the questions. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes. Brian, did you, your team, or even the beverage industry overcome any significant challenges this year? It could be supply chain related, packaging, etc.
I think, Jesse, the one thing that we saw that was super interesting this year that is, I wouldn't call it a new phenomena, but it really was front and center. As investors in the capital space and in the brand space, it used to be a time, not so recent past, frankly, that you could raise money, grow your top line revenue for brands, and then exit out. Now brands need to run as operating businesses. And that is a relatively new phenomena in the last couple of years that was kind of punctuated this past year. You've got a softening of demand from the consumer. You've got excess supply on the shelf. And so these brands, and you got people like me who have hundreds of millions of dollars to give out. I'm not giving out capital right now. So right now, meaning for the rest of the year, you have to have a viable business. You have to have a functioning business. You have to understand that you cannot raise your way to profitability. So the biggest fundamental shift, Jesse, that I saw this year was that brand creators, brand owners, brand founders really had to be operators. You can't just be a marketer. You can't just be a distiller. You got to be an operator. And the brands that are operators are the ones that will make it over the hump of New Year's Eve and continue on through the first quarter, et cetera, of 2024. And the ones that are trying to raise their way to profitability that would say, we'll be profitable in 2026, 27, they're having a real tough time as brands now. And that is when we started investing in brands in 2015, that was not the case. You can raise your way to profitability, and now you have to operate your way to profitability.
Interesting. Does anybody want to comment?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment on that because I am an operator. So I run a brand, a startup brand, right? And you're exactly right, Brian. It's the capital market is extremely tight, and I don't get as involved on that side of it. I let the owners and founders work on that. But from an operational standpoint, companies aren't throwing money at you just to magically make this work. You've got to, and there is a lot of challenges, and I'll certainly get to that in mind. But I absolutely agree with you, Brian. You are spot on, and it feels very different than it has in the past years. There's no question about
it. Yeah, Matt, and I'll share one thing more is that we're going to see a thinning of the herd. We are going to see brands that can't raise the capital really struggle in 2024, because if you think about, and I talk about it all the time online, but if you think about the consumer slowing down, the shelf not getting any bigger, right? So there's not a lot of room for new brands, and a lot of brands are getting pulled off the shelf. So all that combined with nothing is getting cheaper. You mentioned, Jesse, earlier, supply chain, logistics, legal, accounting, TTB compliance, route to market, delivery options, sales options like Bevstrat or others, it's expensive to be a brand. And if you don't have the capital, you can't cut your way to profitability because you're cutting the one thing that really matters, the two things that matter the most in brands, which is marketing and sales. So if you cut those, then you're not going to be a brand. And so what do you cut? You can't cut accounting. Maybe you can outsource it. You can't cut leadership because then who stewards the brand, right, guys? So this is unprecedented times. And what we are seeing right now as a private equity firm are great deals very cheaply. We're seeing founders who are willing to give away the bathwater and the baby just to keep oxygen on the brand. So these are unprecedented times. Scary, perhaps. Opportunistic, 100%.
Yeah, I was just gonna. Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, please. I actually lost the audio for Brian, so I missed that last probably minute. So I don't know if it was anybody else.
No, what I was just saying is that these are unprecedented times, and we are seeing deals that we have never seen before come to our level. And the brand owners are needing to either chase survival or get out, and they can't cut their way out, right? You can't, because marketing and sales are really where it's at. So, we're seeing deals trade at low multiples. What was a 15 multiple is now a 6 multiple. We're seeing us at InvestBev being able to write deals that are very onerous, not vulture-esque, but onerous in the sense that we want a bigger piece of the company we're going to invest in. And that's going to play out throughout 2024, I think.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for it, Matt.
No, I'll shut up because I've been talking all this time. So you're on. You're on.
I just had one second thing. It's just I agree with everyone. I think it seems pretty impossible at this point unless you've exited other things prior. Your high net worth, just coming into the space. I'll just be honest, like without having funding of your own to launch and kind of take it to the next levels, it's pretty much impossible. It's not necessarily like a sign of defeat. Like a lot of people come to me and they're like, I have to raise money. And like, so do celebrities. So does everyone. Yeah. I mean, everyone's raising money all the time. And the rationale, right, is not necessarily like you're doing a bad job at what you're doing. It's just, it's so competitive that to do the nuts and bolts of this business, like to get on a shelf, to hire the right people, like just to generally get brand awareness at a very minimal level, like you need to spend money in order to do those things. And so I guess my advice is always like, look, like don't look at it as a negative. Just realize that like everyone is in the same boat. And the rationale is because the stakes have never been higher. There have never been more brands in market and it's more competitive. So that's just the nature of the beast, and so it is what it is. It's not great, but I think everyone, regardless of growth phase, everyone's pretty much in the same boat, at least on the CPG side from what I see. Like everyone needs money. As soon as they finish a raise, they're looking at the next raise. And so, it is what it is. But
yeah, it's a great point. I always tell people that will ask me like, geez, well, what does it cost to get into the beverage space? Or I've never done this before, but I've got this great tequila seltzer and I think this is going to be the next great thing. And I always tell them, if you don't have a minimum of 3 million to get this thing up and running, I said, you are going to struggle. And you're exactly right. Where as soon as you finish a round, you got to be planning for that next round, that next raise, because it is, from an operational standpoint, things haven't gotten cheaper. We still have to produce product, and you don't get to just produce on demand. You've got to produce, you've got to buy the cans, you've got to buy everything. And you may lay out $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in 1 week. And it's going to take you time to recoup that. And if you're not ready to absorb that, you're going to be in a tough spot. Then if you, to Brian's point with the sales and the marketing, that's the kiss of death. If you cut those back, you're absolutely dead in the water. Well, those aren't cheap either. Marketing is a really expensive thing, and sales certainly. If you want talent, you can go the route of some of these companies where you're a shared brand, or your brand is using a shared sales team. So that's a model, but the wholesalers, the model is very, very different. I kind of joke that we've broken our industry. Me included. I'm another brand in this crazy space, and you've got to do everything right, and you've got to spend like drunken sailors. to try to stay relevant with the wholesalers and the retailers and the consumers all at the same time.
No, that was good. That was good. And does anyone else have any other comment on this topic? I guess for me, as a someone that's been interviewing a lot of these folks throughout the past year, is what little things can they do to get started? There's a lot of brands obviously that aren't going to be able to raise $3 million to start a brand, but they might be able to start with 100,000 and have an idea and get going. I interviewed Unicorn Distillery and what they did, and he's such a processor. I had to ask him, are you German? Because he was but he was from the industry and he knew exactly what he needed to do, from an event process to launching at an event, to social media, to these certain segments and different things that he needed to do. And I'm wondering if that's something that people are missing on. Are we ready to go to the next question? Yep. All right, let's do it. Gary.
Yes.
Did you have any key revelations that arose from your 2023 company reflections?
Yeah, absolutely. And, as the previous discussion was about costs and hiring, the pandemic led to a massive spike in growth for the bev alc industry. And so reacting to the amazing amount of business, suppliers and brands of all sizes went on hiring sprees to grow their teams and found themselves with an overly robust org chart. Sales, marketing, ops, finance, and even internal talent acquisition teams to keep up. But what companies didn't anticipate was that 2023 was going to bring inflation, a looming recession, and, a term that I've been using a lot, post-pandemic normalization. The record growth had to end at some point. And while revenue today is generally stronger than ever before, the growth slowed, and so did the need for such large teams, which led to layoffs and reorganization, especially, Q4, we've been hearing in wine, beer, and spirits, the layoffs. It revealed that the hiring that was done, it was really abundant, but not necessarily strategic. And if you ask any organization what their most important assets are, I think people will be the number one or number two answer always. So if hiring is so crucial to a brand's success, why is it being done so haphazardly? I think it's extremely important for organizations to focus on, again, using the buzzword, strategic hiring. And if your internal team is not equipped or aligned on interview skills or what to truly gather from talent, you're likely to damage your hiring brand and lose the best candidates to your competition. So I think that 22, things were absolutely booming and companies just, hired, through the roof. And 23, unfortunately, there's been a very, a very prevalent trend of layoffs. And I think 2024 is going to sort of carry over the lesson that companies have learned, that you need to be strategic in your hiring and bringing on the right people. So, that's at least what I took coming into 23, riding the high of, the previous few years and then seeing what's unfolded the past 12 months.
Gary, that I have to agree with you. It's you feel like you're going to solve all your problems by adding a lot of bodies to your team, and that gets expensive. Back to, again, what we've already been talking about. But you have to be as strategic as you can, because you also have to look at the longevity of when you're in startup mode and you're writing some of those big $100,000 checks for a production run, let's say. If you've got 15 employees that you weren't quite budgeting correctly for, you could end up having to let some of them go a few months after you just brought them on. So you've got to be very careful, because you're dealing with people. But it can be a tricky game. I know personally, I have built out models and changed them probably 15 different times in a very short span, where here's my goal, this is what the org chart's going to look like. And then we had to kind of pivot over here now it's going to be this, and then, oh wait, now it's going to be this. And it ebbs and flows constantly, where you've got to be as strategic as you possibly can. I also think you have to be kind of lucky too.
Yeah. Matt, I think that that's a good point. I mean, luck plays into everything, but if you can sort of go into your game plan and execute with a strategy, a plan, knowing what gaps need to be filled. And, I'm glad you brought up longevity, because it's not just budgetary. It's also, I think, bringing on not just a large amount of people, but those who align with the company's values, growth trajectory. It's borderline future proofing for your company, making sure, especially at that smaller stage of a company, that your hires are the people that are going to be with you and help you grow over the next 3, 5+ years.
Right. Yep. You're exactly right, Gary.
I totally agree with what Gary is saying in this terms of this lack of strategy around putting let's say a sales team on the field. If you look at job ads from 10, 15 years ago, and you were in a coma for the last decade, and you looked at them today, you wouldn't see a whole lot of difference. Not in the org chart, not in the requirements for the roles. Here's a good example. In the modern competitive environment where there's so many brands and so few distributors, you don't need as many high-paid people to manage distributors as you used to. What you need are more feet on the street, more people actually selling. But yet, you look at the average organization in our industry, and their org chart looks just like it did 10, 15 years ago. So it's a total lack of strategy and adjustment. And this is just part of a long list of things where our industry falls behind other industries in terms of, putting a team on the field and being more strategic about it.
Yeah. And Ben, an observation that I've noticed over the past year and a half, if you used to look at a job board or job postings, it was for entry junior level roles, sometimes a mid-level role. You're seeing companies of, emerging brand size all the way to enterprise posting vice president roles on LinkedIn. And I don't know, maybe some of the larger companies have the capacity internally to sift through the 4,000 applications you get in the 9 hours it's been posted. But I also believe that job posting, if that's your way of trying to cut costs, it's not the way to do it. Job posts, you're maybe going to get exposure to 30% of the talent landscape, and how much of that 30% is really qualified, and then how many of those qualified people are fits for the values and culture of the organization. And you're making those hires because I don't know if it's convenient, it's inexpensive. You think that by blasting it on a website like LinkedIn or Indeed, you're going to find the best people. But I do think that there's got to be, even just basic blocking and tackling when finding the right people and filling in the needs that you truly have.
Yeah, we could go on and on about the lack of skills around assessing talent and finding talent.
Yeah.
Because it's seriously lacking in our industry. The very best people are not actively looking for jobs. They have to be recruited. Yep. Job ads are very, very ineffective. They make a lot more work for the recruiter and the hiring manager, and they're just not very effective. So I think these are great points you're making.
Okay, so I do have one comment I wanted to make, is that about the hiring and about the people, and I hope I didn't miss the boat there, is that what the pandemic showed all of the distributors is that you can do more with less people, and they became a lot more profitable. And we all have mutual friends in the e-commerce platforms. What it did was it said, hey, we're going to sell you the same amount of goods, if not more, and we're going to do it all online, and we're going to force you to go to our platform, whether it's LibDibBen or whether it's eProof or whether it's Electronic Southern or Electronic RNDC, whatever it is, they have learned to make a lot more money with a lot less bodies. Conversely, who's getting hosed? the independent brand, right? The independent brand is the brand, and this is kind of this has been my screaming for a decade, is the independent brand is getting totally hosed because 90% of the sales from Southern come from 10% of the book, but they need 100% of the book to have a breadth of selection to show other people that they're Southern, right? Yep. I think either Ben said it or Gary or Matt, I can't recall, but the shared service model, some kind of sales model where you get in front of the retailer or the on-premise account and you say, here is the story of my brand. Because tequila, and no one gives a shit if it's The Rock or Kevin Hart or Michael Jordan or Wiz Khalifa, right? People don't necessarily care, but what they do care about is the story of the brand that the retailer or the bartender can then go sell to their audience, right? So when you look at, Gary, you were talking about it, hiring salespeople, I would only add hire storytellers that can sell instead of salespeople that can storytell. That's the only point of differentiation the small independent brand read under 100,000 cases can ever have to make headway in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Very well.
Ryan, I think that's a very good point. I had spent 7 years at the largest distributor in Metro New York, and I loved telling stories, building brands, putting together, 4 bottles to bring into a particular account. Oh, Tommy's going to love these. These are going to fit with his customers. And yeah, you're right. If you're not, say, a Diageo, a Gallo, a Bacardi, it's going to be very difficult to get on quota, to get work with, time to present at general sales meetings. So yeah, thank you for adding.
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is the struggle of the independent brand.
Yeah.
If you can't get share of mind, Taylor, at the distributor level, then you can't get share of mind at the retail level. Then you can't raise capital to keep your brand.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally.
It goes up, down, left, right.
Yeah.
And so it goes back to kind of what I had tried to communicate earlier was you have to be an operating company. It can't just, and heaven help you if you actually have physical assets like a distillery. Much better to where you've got people that need to run a pot still and come in every day and you're guessing at your production for the next quarter. Heaven help you. It's much better to be an asset light brand right now with a marketing person and a CEO and a head of sales and go do what you do. And that's going to be, by the way, from a financial aspect, that's going to be the way going forward until it's not, right? Until you have enough revenue to build your physical asset plant. You're going to be outsourcing everything.
And yeah, you should be investing in the right people, a lean team, but the right people for the brand.
100%.
And my whole business that fell on my lap, it kind of started as a result of that. Like a venture firm connected me, honestly, to some founders 4 or 5 years ago when I had a full-time job and said, look, like they didn't say this, and they say I give them too much credit for my business. That's fine. But in theory, I think what they were thinking is we don't want the companies, and maybe Brian, you could speak to this. I don't know. The original concept for the business was like, they connected me with all these founders. I think in the back of their minds, just building on this whole conversation was like, we put money into these early stage businesses. Like we don't want to see them then hire all these agencies to do PR, marketing, social, blah, blah. We don't know if they need every single executive. Taylor, since 19, has done some stuff across most of these companies. Maybe she can help. And that's literally the model. Like I don't take on projects. I don't have like hard deliverables, but like I'm really focused on making sure that every week I meet with 70 CEOs for 30 minutes once a week all over the world. And all we do is just go through very mission critical parts of the company. Like I don't get into the granulars, but like I know what do they need to focus on in order not to fail? Like we need to talk to Brian. We need to raise $5 million. We have to talk to Gary about hiring. Like these are the things that we need to do. So all I'm responsible for literally outside of connecting people is making sure that they focus on those few things that they need to keep laser focused on, right? But I do think going back to the staffing, I do think a big part of why my business came to be was for that reason alone. Was like, we don't want these early stage companies to bring on 100 groups and vendors. We want to make sure that they, are lean and mean. And I serve a fairly unique little side purpose in the business. But anyway, it's an interesting topic around hiring and finding that right mix.
So think about our business that we're all very passionate about. Everyone on this call is very passionate about the adult beverage business. But just think about the business from like an organic standpoint. And I've at 53 years old, I've seen too much life at this point, and it's the only business I know of where you have to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars into it before you sell your first can, right? You've got to go through legal, you got to go through compliance, you got to go through packaging and formulation, you got to go through logistics, you got to hire an MHW or a Park Street, or you got to travel around the country pitching investors, and you haven't sold shit. Nothing. You may not even have a product. So,
right. You don't look a day over 20. You don't look a day over 20.
I am about 6,000. I'm about 6,000 days over 20. But thank you. But I do agree with you, Taylor. Thank you for that. But I will share. With you that the business is so hard and so challenging to begin with, and then like from where we come in, and it could be at BevStrat or InvestBev or Sprout or one of the places where we enter the ecosystem for the brand. And Taylor, you know this, and guys, you know this. We've got a $150,000 director of marketing. We've got a global head of sales when they're only selling in Minneapolis, right? Ben, this is probably drives you nuts. And we've got this is our HR person, our HR professional, or our regional manager, and you sold 1,000 cases nationally. It's the founders need to really look at this as a hunt what you kill kind of business until you're at the grocery store, right? Where every food is at your table. It is such a hard business. And the advice, Jesse, that we're putting out today, or the commentary we're putting out today, should be written down and stapled to your forehead, founders, because there's 5 people on the call that are saying, don't waste your money. Don't blow all your everything, every asset you have.
Correct. Yep.
Start real lean, real light, outsource the whole world, hire smartly, Gary, to your point, hire the right kind of people, use the right strategy, right? Matt and Ben, and then when you get to 10,000 cases, then you hire X. It's amazing to me how this business is the hardest business I've ever been involved with, yet there are people knocking down the door to get into it. It's really quite funny.
Yeah, especially now.
Because they don't
there's
understand what's involved.
No.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet.
You know why? Because they see a glass of wine. They go out to dinner on Christmas Eve, and they'll see a glass of wine on every table in the restaurant and say, why can't I do that? Or they'll go to a crowded bar on a Friday night in Midtown, and they'll say, Jesus, everyone's got vodka. Let's make a vodka. Yeah. With no consideration that there's 600 vodkas registered in the USA, and the shelf only holds 40 linear. It's got 41 linear inches, right? So they don't think about that piece. They only think about, oh, look, all my friends are getting drunk. Let's make a beer. It's lunacy to me. So the consigliere on this call really should be advocates for the survival of these small guys. They have no idea what they're getting into.
You're spot on, Brian. That about summed up the whole thing, Jesse. I think we're done.
Are we done? Matt, you are next here. Your question is, were there any unexpected developments that diverged from what you thought were going to be your anticipated outcomes?
It's funny when I saw that question, I kind of laughed out loud because let's narrow it down to one or two, because it's countless numbers. But for me, probably the biggest challenge or thing I realized for this year, and I have a feeling everyone on this call is going to feel some of this as well. When I said that we've kind of broken our industry, there's been this big shift from the days where you could take your brand, and Brian, I'm going to touch on probably some of the things you've brought up, right? You take your brand, you're small, you get it out in front of the retailer, and you've got something unique. And then you think, hey, this retailer is kind of interested. Great. You do some tastings, whatever. You start getting some buzz around it. That's exciting. Now you got to find a wholesaler. In the old days, that really wasn't that hard. You could have relationships. I've got a lot of relationships personally. Those are all thrown out the window. These wholesalers now are like, not interested. you got to have the chains. I need you to have 5 key mandates in a chain. And I had a wholesaler in North Carolina do this to me earlier this year. We had the distributor agreement, everything ready to go. And then at the 11th hour, I had assigned the brand to them. Everything was great. I need 5 mandates. And I said, that's a pipe dream. Who gets 5 mandates before you're even in the market? And it wasn't just a small chain here or there. This was, I need Walmart, I need Target, I need Publix, and we went down the list. And I said, well, that's simple. If I had that, I wouldn't even need you. That we kind of laughed and kind of agreed, okay, fine, we move on. But that has been the case time and time again, where a small brand, it is a struggle. And I think, Taylor, I was reading something you had, an interview you did. I'm not sure exactly when, but I believe you hit on it perfectly, that you can go into some of these big distributors like a Southern or an RNDC or something like that and think, whoo, all my problems are solved.
Yeah.
But you might be 85th down the list of priorities when it comes to an RTD or a canned beverage, an FMB, whatever you want to call it. And I've lived that as well. And that's not necessarily the right option. So my biggest aha for this year is the old ways of, you've got a great brand. You're excited about it. People seem to be excited about it. Super. That does not mean you're going to get the wholesalers on board with you. And that does not mean you're going to get the retailer to come on board, because now the chains have gotten to the point, there are so many brands and suppliers. They're saying, yep, I think your brand's great, but you can't formally present to me. Your distributor has to present. Like, well, I don't have a distributor. Well, once you do, have them present, and then we'll be good. You go to the distributor and say, hey, could we kind of early partner? You present to them, they're interested, and the distributor ends up not doing it. So now you've lost that chain interest, and you don't have a distributor, and now you're not going into that market. So that has been a really big challenge. And I talk to a lot of different people, a lot of brands. It's the same thing time and time again, where I don't know what the key answer is, because some chains are still willing to take a chance, even if you don't have the wholesaler yet, assuming you'll get one. Others, forget it. You're dead in the water before you even get started. And that really makes it tough for the little brands to even get noticed and to gain any kind of traction in the market. And I don't know if anybody disagrees, but I'd love to hear different thoughts.
I agree, but there are ways, Matt. There are ways around those things. And the little guy, it's funny, and we all can probably relate to this. You know, people come all the time into our world and say, I want to be in Costco, right? I want to be in Total, Publix, Bevmo, whatever. And the way we would share it at our companies are, go with a 3PL first. And here's why. So whether it's an MHW or Park Street, whatever, go with one of those first. And here's why. Because A, you can control your expenses. They're costly. They're cost prohibitive for sure, because you pay for storage and you pay for logistics and delivery and all of those things. And you have to pay for a salesperson and whatever. But you can set your own margin, right? And you can put your brand on the shelf at the price you want it to be on. The RNDCs and the Breakthroughs and the Southerns of the world, let's say they take your brand, your new brand. Let's say they're doing you a favor, Matt, because you went to sleepover Camp Gary with the son of the founder of the cousin of the aunt of Southern, right? And you can do all those things, but they're going to put 45 points on your brand for the effort, right? They're going to take your FOB landed. They're going to add 45 points because no one knows what the hell you're selling. And when it hits the shelf finally, it's going to be 3 times what it should be. It's going to die there. Then you're going to get delisted at Southern. Then your brand is ruined in the market. Those are all real things. So what I like to say is a market point of entry, and Matt, this is to your point, is go with one of the 3PLs. Get on the shelf. Get 100 PODs. Get 100 points of distribution, and then go to the wholesaler and say, look, I'm going to de-risk this transaction for you. I'm going to say, here's 100 depletions that are waiting for you. If you take my brand, take 100 cases from me, put me in the network, and I will rinse and repeat this all over the country where your distribution footprint is. I don't want 17 states at once, Southern, because I can barely afford to keep my one state open. If you put me in 17 states, you're going to delist me in a quarter. We don't want that. I know you have to do that because that makes it more economical for you, But let's have a realistic conversation. Let's go to New York, New Jersey, California, Florida, Illinois first, right? Good active markets. Let me work those markets. And then from there, let's talk about the PODs, de-risking the proposition. And so then, Matt, the conversation of 5 mandates becomes an easier conversation, because you can say, look, I'm saturating the independent channel, and the chain channel should have the same kind of success. Let's be partners on this, big distributor. You get the mandates with me. Let's do it together, and we can prove this all, right? Yep. So the whole system is set up. The one person who gets hosed the most is the brand.
Yeah.
No one else gets hosed in the whole transaction but the brand. So the brand's got to get smarter about how they go to market, what resources they put in the market. And to your point, you get that mandate question. There's no way you're getting mandates, and you're not, and chains aren't buying shit until third quarter 2024 right now.
I know.
And that purchase is for first quarter 2025.
You're spot on. Yep. Great points, Brian. Absolutely.
Yeah, Matt, I mean, what you had just said, it's the chicken or the egg scenario. And, an industry buddy of mine had taken over as the head of sales for a TV company. And he was venting to me about, what the hell am I supposed to do? The distributors aren't taking us in. They say, well, if you can show us that you've got market presence, you've got traction.
Exactly right. This is the issue, right?
And in wondering what to do, I think Brian's 3PL approach is one that I suggest a lot, because, thinking you've got 46 markets with Southern Glazers is a victory. What's your sell-through rate going to be?
Yeah, right.
Orders. So what had happened in the instance of my friend was e-commerce, although down almost 5% this year, digital and e-commerce became a big focus to get brand recognition online with consumers. And at the WSWA conference back in April, they'd won several medals and were approached by some distributors. But that's not always going to happen. So it is frustrating. But yeah, I mean, Brian, New York, New Jersey, Florida, and then if you want to add California, great. I always say go an inch wide and a mile deep, and then analyze the the behaviors, the results, and what works. You can then copy and paste into newer markets as you have the resources that allow you to expand at the right time.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Taylor, you are up. What valuable insight did you gain in 2023, and how can it inform and benefit your strategies in 2024?
So I don't have any strategies of my own. Just work with people who have strategies, I hope. Be an issue if they didn't. No, I mean, the biggest insight I think for me is just, this is kind of like a macro thought, is just to find the white space. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing around the saturation and like what came first, the chicken or the egg and all those things. And just if I had another layer to it is, a lot of people kind of come to, I would say this group, more broadly speaking, I don't want to speak on everyone's behalf, but like virtually saying like, how do I sell my business? My name is Mary. I have a moonshine. I'm based in Idaho. My business is worth $35 million. I've sold 5 of them. And I want Diageo to buy me tomorrow. And you're just like, okay, I want a lot of things. I would love a house in the Hamptons, but I don't have it. So with that being said, though, I think everyone gets tripped up. And Brian, I'd love your thoughts on this too. And everyone else, like if anyone else has any thoughts, but like even early stage companies get so lost in the granulars of like, what do I have to, what metrics do I have to reach, to sell my business? And you're like, you're barely in a market. Like you, no one's even tried your product in your hometown. Like, why are you already thinking about this? And I get it. But the point of the matter is like, I always try to instill versus thinking about like what exactly, and that's where like Brian comes in. Like Lord knows he will tell you exactly what you need to do on a very granular level to get to the next phase and the next phase, and the next phase. But I think if we take a step back, where I come in and what like a bigger insight that I've kind of come to realize is it's really about finding your unique value proposition in this market. And it's always been, something that I've advocated for is like finding out what's unique about you. And it's not necessarily like, okay, well, I make the best vodka from the best well and the best water. It's really, really, really taking yourself out of the equation, and being like, that's not enough, and pushing yourself as a founder even further to really think about what is unique about what you're doing. And when you think about how do you fit into an investment portfolio, how do you fit into a distribution portfolio, how do you fit into a corporation that you may want to be bought by, how do you fit in, and how do you find that white space? And really, really, really trying to own that to the best of your ability, I think is just a bigger insight that I've come to realize. I think because you do see companies that are earlier stage that sometimes do get bought. And it's not always about just how many cases you've sold. It's really about the relationships that these people have fostered with some of these groups, but also finding an area that's ownable to them. And I think if people can think about that, I think there is more of a chance for them to succeed.
So it's funny, Taylor, when we buy a company or invest in a company, we like to see the hole they're filling within the marketplace. And to your point, it's not about 10,000 cases and then look for an M&A team. You'll look at Prestige, or you look at Loch Lomond, these big companies. Like we are in the process of a transaction right now with both of those companies. And the way that transaction happened was the brand that they are considering buying is not necessarily a home run, but it fills a hole in their portfolio. And so it's not always about get to 10,000 cases or get to profitability. It's about, to what Taylor's saying, is filling the hole in their portfolio. They may have a WBE mandate, women business. They may have a minority business mandate.
Right.
And so that's something to think about as well. And one thing this team is industry insiders, the people on this call. And every day last year at this time, from the fourth quarter starting to New Year's Eve, I would get a Mark Brown or a Wine and Spirit Daily or a Wine Industry Advisor, and every day would be a notice, guys and gals, on an M&A transaction. Do you recall last year?
It was crazy.
Okay, now let's look at this year's emails. Nothing. Last year, once or twice a week, we would get a notice on so-and-so is buying so-and-so. These two companies are merging. This distributor is rolling up 3 small distributors. That was every day in the fourth quarter, and it's been every day in the fourth quarter for a few years. This year, there's been bubkiss. There's been nothing. So what does that tell you, us collectively, and the greater good is that there's no roll-ups. There is no M&A activity. There is no capital investing, although we're about to announce a deal today. But there is no capital investing going on out there. And so you have to have a brand. And to your point, you've got a brand you have to have a brand that fills a hole. Because you drink vodka doesn't mean, and you make a vodka for yourself, doesn't mean that's a vodka for everyone. It means a vodka for one, right? So I think that, look, I'm a little bit monopolizing, and I'm sorry, but Taylor, I'm in your camp totally about, it's not just about the number of cases or the revenue. It's about, do you fill a hole? It's about a greater good that you may not even know about, that the parent company, that LVMH needs Moët Hennessy to fill a void in their portfolio that has nothing to do with anything other than filling a void, because the shareholders want the portfolio filled. And so you can have a shitty brand that's not doing anything that can be acquired for 11x if you know where that hole is. So when we enter brands as far as investing or buying, we're always looking 3 years ahead of where's the hole in the market and who's going to buy us. And in the brands, Taylor, that you're counseling with, and all of us are kind of consiglieres towards, those brands really need to not only look at right in front of them, right in front of their nose, but then look right in front of the windshield as well, and then look at the next off-ramp as well. Those are all things that have to happen when you're building a brand.
And Brian, also going back earlier, you had said, people are at a restaurant or a bar and they say, oh man, look at that cool vodka bottle. Why can't I? I think a lot of people have entered the alcoholic beverage space over the past few years who are very successful in their own right. But being extremely successful in a different industry doesn't exactly translate into alcohol. Three-tier system, it's nuanced, the compliance, and out there you see the sexiness of Casamigos and aviation, these big numbers associated with acquisition. What the general population doesn't see is the amount of carnage
Yeah.
left
Yeah.
inside of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you make $1 million in the booze business? You start with 10 million.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't see it. Like, to your point. And look, we all work
Yeah.
with the same kind of brands. We all know the same people. It's going to, and I'm in Miami, so going to the beach and being like, hey, everyone's drinking tequila, I'm going to start a tequila, is baloney, right? Because you know what they're drinking? They're drinking 100% Blanco, and there's margarita culture, and you want to make a reposado and añejo, and you have to wait 8 years to do it. You know, there needs to be a macro look, like a you know, like back in the day when I was a kid, there was what, Motorcycle's Guide to the Galaxy, was that a book, right? There needs to be like which we kind of all are collectively doing, a how to not get hosed by the industry manual, you know, and it should be, everyone should have a chapter here.
And you have to be really careful who you listen to, because a lot of people are living in the past and they haven't kept up with the time. So if you listen to the wrong person, you're going to be headed for disaster.
We need to quickly move on to our final and last question here. Ben, what does the adult beverage industry need to stop doing immediately, in your opinion?
Well, listen to this podcast. That wouldn't be stop doing it, but we've touched on a lot of these things. And I have a long list. I'm almost out of time. I'll keep it to 3. Okay, so three quick things. Just one. The first one we've already kind of talked about, but stop expecting that distributors can sell for you. Those days are long gone. Too many brands. We're talking tens of thousands of brands. I have a quick anecdote. One of my clients has been selling 100,000 cases of wine a year through one of the big distributors. He wants to launch a new brand in 2024, and they won't take it on. And he's like, well, what do you mean? We're already partners. We're already doing business. They're like, we don't need another brand. So people need to stop their expectations that distributors are going to sell for you. And related to that is, stop thinking that you could hire someone who could better manage the distributor. It doesn't matter how tight your relationships are or what kind of access you have to the top executives. They're just not capable. There's too many brands. So that's the first thing, is just recalibrating expectations of what a distributor can do for you, and stop trying to manage them. I look at, and Gary, you can confirm this, I look at job ads and I see the qualifications they're looking for of salespeople, and it says things like manage the distributor, motivate the distributor, educate the distributor. I'm like, what planet are you living on? No matter how well you do that, they still can't sell for you. The second thing, and this is a particular personal beef of mine, our industry is so far behind other consumer products in the way that we sell. We're selling in a style that was popular in the 1950s, and I'm talking about features and benefits selling. I pulled this bottle. I'm going to tell you how it was made, where the grapes were grown, who made it, the barrel regimen. If I tell you enough about this product, you're going to be convinced to buy it. It's just so silly. And that is not how products are sold. Read Daniel Pink, How to Sell as Human. Read some books about how people buy. Read Building a Story Brand. So this has got to stop, this selling features and benefits selling. Because the truth is, having a great product in a great package at a great price, all that does is get you to the starting line. Those things don't differentiate you from the broad selection. So, give that up. And God forbid you're going to sit there in front of a cold buyer relationship with no relationship, and you start talking about the qualities of your product, how it tastes, you're dead. You're absolutely dead. And then the third thing I would say to stop doing is, and it's not necessarily stop it, but reduce it greatly. There are certain things that we do to sell in our industry that cannot be scaled. I have nothing against in-store tastings, very, very powerful, but it can't be scaled. Distributor work lists can't be scaled. General sales manager distributor, anything that involves the physical presence of a human being cannot be scaled. The good news is there's many, many things you can do that can be scaled. digital lead generation, not building an audience on rented land. Like your social media audience, yeah, that's important, but your email list is ownable to you and can't be taken away. And your email list is infinitely scalable. I look at people's websites and they're doing nothing to convert their website visitors to email subscribers. All they're doing with email is sending out monthly newsletters, which no one reads or cares about. That's a relic from the 90s and the early days of email marketing. Understanding what can be scaled and how to do it really well, that's going to get you a lot farther than these things that require a plane ticket or some kind of physical event. So I just think that people need to wake up. Everything we've already talked about today is so relevant. But I love this question because the things you need to stop doing are just as important as the things you should be doing instead. The problem is people don't know what to do instead, and that is a big problem. I get fired up about this topic because people are not keeping up with the times. They don't really understand marketing of adult beverages. They don't really understand what motivates people to buy. And so it's a big problem. I think there's going to be, and Brian, you may have mentioned this, there's going to be a great separation in these coming years about people who get this and adjust accordingly, control their own destiny more, and people who don't. So
yeah, it's Ben, you're right on. I will just share one thing, and then I unfortunately have to hard out. The selling is about selling to the people in the language they speak, right? If your retailer is cared about gross margin dollars, SKU velocity, that's how you sell. You're not going to sell a guy on the angle of the sun
money, right?
and the slope and the amount of rainy days for the terroir. No one gives a shit. The guy wants to know,
right?
And there's three different messages, right? The retailer wants to know, 100%. The retailer wants to know how quickly can I get rid of it, and how quickly can I turn that into cash. And the distributor wants to know, I don't want to get stuck with this before the money comes in, right? Before we have to do a delisting. And the supplier wants to know, how can I sell the most at the most money? Three different audiences, three different messages, and oftentimes, Ben, to your point, the salesperson is selling in a language that the retailer does not care about. What the retailer cares about is payrolls every other Friday, and how quickly can I turn this case of wine for $300 into $390 in cash that I can then pay payroll on the subsequent Friday. And if you go into the account with that thought process, selling to the retailer in their own language, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of success. But to your point, Ben, there's a day of reckoning coming where there's going to be a cleansing of brands. And the people that are in it for hobbies are going to go back to their hobby. And the people that are in it for business are going to have to run a business.
Well said.
Brian, nope. That's okay. Anybody else want to comment on this?
Yeah, Ben, I do agree with you that things have changed. Some people are living in the past. However, pre-pandemic, our industry really hadn't changed for 100 years. Prohibition, repeal of prohibition, 100 years, and then the pandemic. I do believe, I think we can all agree that having presence or feet on the street in each market is important. And I do believe that in-store demos and tastings can still be effective. I think work withs and presenting at general sales meetings are something that brands still need to do. But also that's where it goes back to strategic hiring. When I worked for a distributor, a regional sales manager didn't necessarily have to roll up their sleeves and get their hands as dirty as they do now. They had area sales managers, market managers, etc., underneath them. As far as an organization staying lean but succeeding, I believe that it's about having someone. I mean, even if you're a brand, let's say you're nationwide, split the country into 6, have a regional sales manager in each of those segments. Roles, the responsibilities of roles have changed. I do agree. Things have changed an incredible amount. And I think that can be adapted to, or the change made a little bit more digestible, in saying that the roles of particular positions and titles have changed. But it is liquid to lips, that's what will lead to sales. And I think in-store demos, tastings at general sales meetings, et cetera, still carry value.
We could probably go on all day with it, Jesse. How are we doing on
I know.
time? We've lost
Well,
a couple folks.
Yeah, we are at the turn of the hour, so we can wrap it up here. Do you guys want to answer, your guidance and recommendations for 2024 with and pick your audience that you want to talk to?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Go
ahead, Gary.
Touching upon, the discussion earlier and also throughout this discussion, I encourage every organization to have a hiring approach that makes sense for them. Build an internal assessment process to decide whether you should fill a role internally, and when investing in a search firm is actually crucially important to do. And every organization needs to do their due diligence. Again, looking inside and doing a self-assessment. Do your due diligence in your needs, and finding the best partner. Look, whether it's hiring internal TA or it's partnering with a search firm to make strategic hires. Candidates should not just look good on paper. They need to match the company's values as well as its goals. So, using the buzzword for the 400th time, strategic hiring. And I believe that means somewhat of an investment inside, in your approach.
All right, well said. Who wants to go next, Matt or Ben?
Go ahead, Ben.
So we're talking about guidance or recommendations for 2024. And you had mentioned in the notes that we could address specific cohort of the audience. And for me, my clients are small distilleries and small wineries. And I have many clients who sell everything they make profitably with no salespeople, no plane tickets, no distributors. So my advice is to take the time to learn about how these people are doing that. And I will give you a hint. A lot of it has to do with being able to access your consumers directly, and email is the best way to do that, but also access trade buyers directly. I think email is underutilized because most people think newsletters when they hear the word email. They don't really understand modern email marketing in the way that other consumer product categories do. So my best guidance for 2024 is to learn how to use modern email strategy, inbound marketing, and digital touch points. It has the power to transform your sales revenue without having to add headcount. And I've nothing against hiring people. I do recruiting too, but for small startup brands, get as far as you can digitally before you start adding headcount. And if you don't know what that looks like, there's plenty of information out there. And the best place to look is, other consumer product categories that are leveraging email in a powerful way. And one last thing to add on, and that's SMS messaging. I predict that's going to be really huge for our industry. I'm already seeing it. I've subscribed to a lot of brands' text messaging service so I can study what they're doing, how they're doing it, the frequency. So I'm really bullish on that.
Interesting. Matt?
My advice would be, if you're a new brand starting out, decide or try to figure out early on what it is you want to be when you grow up. There are different strategies on how to do this. Do you want to be a brand that each year you go into a market and grow that, and then the next year you do it again, and the next year you do it again, and build out that base? That's great. That's one model. Is your model you want to go broad very quickly and as far out as possible to be ripe for acquisition? What is it you want to do? Because the strategies are completely different. And then with that, it will help you then understand what it is from a capital standpoint you're going to need to do that. Because if you only have $100,000 in the bank, let's say, and you want to go into 15 states, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you have 100 in the bank and you want to start in your community and start branching out from there, maybe hire a few people, kind of do that type of thing, the grassroots, then you can probably make a go of it. But it could be a 10-year process to get you to that point that you can either sell your brand or kind of move on to something different. So just my advice would be, and I tell people this all the time, figure it out. What do you want to be? And then put that plan together and go for it. But be ready to pivot multiple times, because you're going to be blindsided by some interesting things along the way. That's it.
Yeah, that's interesting. On pivoting and changing. When you mentioned it earlier, and I really wanted to dig into it, but we had so many other questions to move on to. So Matt, maybe you can jump on again later in the year, and we can talk about that. And Ben, wow, SMS messaging is not something I expected our industry to get on board with so fast, actually. So I want to follow them too and see what they're doing, because that's fascinating to me. And I guess, when you think of SMS messaging, direct to consumers works a lot better, I guess, than probably B2B, just because, Talbot's, for example, I think I get an SMS message from them every single day on 20% off, 50% off, shipping. So, I guess in that regard, it does make a lot of sense. So I'm excited for that. I think that there's proof and analytics behind the success of SMS messaging.
Yeah, and if you're getting a text from a brand every single day, they're doing it wrong.
It's
there's
awful.
a right way, like
It's
everything
awful.
else, there's a right way and a wrong way. But for small brands, this is a game changer if they do it right. And remember, people are opting into this service. It's not an outbound activity. It's really an inbound activity. They're voluntarily signing up to receive your texts. And if you don't abuse them, it can be a fantastic new sales channel that's 100% controllable by you.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I do have one little surprise question for you guys. If you've got a few minutes, it's a one-word question, and if you could summarize 2024 in one word, what would it be? I'll tell you mine. The first word that this happened on my mentor call this Sunday. We were just chit-chatting about something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a fun, this word came to mind of 2024, and for me, that's community. Because I think social media is always going to exist. It's always going to be there, but people are going to get burnt out. People are picking one channel over the other and sticking to one channel instead of trying to be everywhere. And I think there's been proof on the consumer side, that direct-to-consumer side, that community is the future. I think building communities, and whether it be a brand to people, is going to be a very effective way to connect with their consumers on a more personal level. And you can kind of talk to them about the brand, but also build a community around that and ask questions and survey and offer them discounts and whatnot. So I think, to me, that's what I'm seeing as a real potential in the future, whether it's 2024 or 2025 and beyond. It'll take a while to get there, but that's my word, community.
So you're asking, Jesse, a word for 2023 or a word for 2024?
2024.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've got one for 2023. I may not be able to say it on the podcast. But,
you can say it. This is not made for children.
No. Actually, I would say 2023, the one word is wild. It has been a roller coaster. Lots of excitement, a lot of craziness, a lot of frustration, right? It's I think, wild. But I think in 2024, the word that I would pick is fun. Ben, you can relate to this, right? We've been in this business for a long time. People always flocked to this business because it was fun. This is what and a lot of times we've kind of stripped the fun out of the business. I feel like we're going to start shifting back again. We're going to start finding ways to make this fun again. And the reason we all do it. I still have fun. I still enjoy the heck out of it. That's why I do it. I did have more hair years ago, but I can, it's either my children or this job. But I do think we're going to start introducing a lot more fun back into this business again.
I like that.
If I've got to choose one word to describe 2024, if I had a crystal ball, I guess I would go with optimism. Since March of 2020, there's been so much change and newness and lack of predictability. And, as we've discussed on the podcast today, Brian said some of the brands that aren't taking it seriously or doing it right are going to disappear. And I am hoping that 2024 is going to bring some normalcy back to our industry, the growth, the trajectory, life in general. But I'm very optimistic, especially now that, it was Dickens who said it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, right? I'm really proud of that. I read Dr. Seuss primarily, so pulled that one out. But we've seen the business absolutely boom. We've experienced 2023 where almost every organization has failed to hit goals because, we didn't predict what would happen. We couldn't see. So I'm optimistic that having seen, the entire spectrum of how our industry reacts and also, adapts to, changing landscape. I'm very optimistic that 2024 is going to be a solid year, realistic growth, and I'll use the buzzword one final time: a strategic approach to brand building and industry prosperity.
Yeah, well said. Ben?
So my word would be inbound. I'm all about inbound marketing. My wish for everyone in the industry is to learn what it is, how to execute it, how it can benefit you. I think there's too much outbound, interrupted, unsolicited activity. Learn how to attract people to you and enroll to your cause. Build your own audience, not on rented land, but on your own land. And I just think that could be a real difference maker for big brands, medium-sized brands, and small brands. I'm all about inbound marketing.
Yeah, that certainly is a great advice, Ben. I know you, when we started talking, that was kind of exactly what your advice was, to try to get to that inbound place. And it's certainly been in the back of my mind for the last year on how do I get there? How does it work? What does it look like for me? I don't have a brand, I have a service. So how does that look like for me to help get to that place? And so I'm hoping I've found it and next year it'll work for me. So inbound is a good word for me too. I love having fun. So, I'm looking forward to having fun. I think a lot of people that get in the industry think that it's just all about fun, but what they don't realize is how hard it is and how hard we work to actually earn that fun in the industry. But it is a great industry, but it is a tough one, as you've all heard and felt throughout your own careers. So is there any final words? Anybody, anything that we haven't said yet today in closing? Alrighty, well, I appreciate you all coming on this roundtable. I was super excited about it. Please let me know your thoughts. I'd love to potentially continue this in some format or some way. I will use this. I will be going to every other week on my full podcast, and I will use this as a special segment. So anyway, thank you for all your support this year and coming on my podcast and coming back on.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Jesse.
Absolutely, Jesse. Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays, and thank you guys. This was a really, really fun conversation to have, and
Agreed.
Matt, to see you again. Ben, to chat with you. Brian and Taylor, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
All right,
Agreed.
excellent. Happy
Thanks,
holidays.
everybody. Take
See
care.
you next year.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Tune in next Thursday and have a great week. This week's episode was produced by Fedora J Productions.